Hi, everyone, and welcome to Heal Endometriosis Naturally with Wendy K Laidlaw. Wendy has spent the last 2 years helping women with various stages of endometriosis to heal naturally after putting her condition into remission. After her own healing success from stage 4 endometriosis and adenomyosis, she's inspired to heal others, and her goal is to help some of the 175 million women know that there is another way other than painkillers, drugs, or surgery. This is the place to be for real talk with real people for real results, so you can learn how to heal your endometriosis naturally. Please note that the opinions expressed in this program may represent options, but are not a substitute for proper medical care. Before starting any new healthcare program, we recommend you consult with a health professional.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Heal Endometriosis Naturally with me, Wendy K Laidlaw. I hope that this podcast and YouTube video finds you well as always. This week's podcast is entitled This is Empowerment. We're continuing the final part of the series of This is Domestic Abuse and finishing on a high note. But This is Empowerment is about how to step away from domestic abuse and emotional mistreatment slowly, safely, and securely, EndoBoss style. So the last few weeks were more somber podcasts in which I attempted to explain the reality and mistreatment for some women and children behind closed doors in their very own home. Whilst I normally like to offer a positive perspective on life by sharing all the endometriosis success stories and be an upbeat, positive person, this subject has profoundly affected me in the past and many women that I work with. So I felt that it was important to share what may be impairing and preventing the natural healing process of your endometriosis and or adenomyosis conditions. I've mentioned in the previous podcast how I believe it is a combination of the 5 Ps, the 5 poisons: produce, products, property, paths, and people that make endometriosis such a challenge to address. I believe it is the toxicity element of people in particular that may inadvertently and subconsciously be affecting the immune system without a woman's awareness. This specific element of people took me many years, if not decades, to figure out, comprehend, and accept. Emotional mistreatment and abuse was an element I had overlooked and poorly understood. So therefore, it delayed my healing and caused me great distress over decades. This is why I share this vital information with you now, at whatever stage of your endometriosis healing journey that you're on. I hope by sharing my insights in this podcast series that it may help women to speed up their own healing process. So today we take a much more positive and powerful stance and position by discussing empowerment. Empowerment is a word bandied about with wanton regard for its true meaning. So let's first look at the dictionary definition of empowerment. The dictionary's definition of empowerment is the process of becoming stronger and more confident, especially in controlling one's life and claiming one's right. For a woman to separate from abuse and to end the generations of mistreatment, it is essential to understand the origins of why you may have certain unhelpful or negative beliefs about yourself, and why this attracts such toxic people to you in the first place. So before we start to explore deeper at what empowerment is and how you can learn to embrace it, let's look at the opposite meaning of empowerment, which of course is powerlessness. Powerlessness doesn't just happen to us. Powerlessness is a learned behavior, invariably learned out of basic survival in the family of origin that we grew up in. Within the context of our discussions, powerlessness may have occurred without any direct knowledge of it happening. It may have been a slow and corrosive process designed by the toxic parent or partner to erode your sense of identity with their intent to power over you and your life. That is why emotional mistreatment and domestic abuse are so dangerously toxic. What starts off as a little acceptance of your partner or family member to control over some aspect of your life, for example, like finances, then before you know it, you may have lost total control, feel powerless, trapped and confused, and totally beholden to them. In my 30s, I had thought myself as a strong, independent woman who was astute and in total control of her life, thoughts, and feelings. Therefore, it came as a shock to me to wake up years later in a highly toxic relationship, be debilitated by endometriosis and adenomyosis, forced to wind up my successful property business, end up bedridden and close to death with near total organ failure. How had this happened to me, I cried, for there was nothing tangible I could see or do to fight this. I had little or no comprehension of the wicked web that had been weaved by the toxic people around me as they slowly chipped away at my soul, my spirit, and my sense of self. As Walter Scott famously proclaimed, "Oh, what a tangled web we weave when we first practice to deceive." Powerlessness at that point in my life had become the result of sustained coercive abuse and emotional mistreatment. I had always thought I was in control, but it was an illusion and one that cost me dearly. What I had not appreciated was that subversive and coercive control is conducted by the toxic person below the level of consciousness. It may come under the guise of, "But I was only joking," or "You're too sensitive," or "You're not wearing that, are you?" and other derogatory, underhand remarks that, like drops of water repeatedly hitting a stone, slowly wear away any sense of self. The toxic person's sole intent is to cause harm, power over you, and detach you from your own identity. I really struggled with this concept. I had thought that if somebody said they loved me, then love was supposed to be kind and safe and secure. It never occurred to me that love was cruel. It never occurred to me that love wasn't supposed to hurt. It never occurred to me that love was more than just the words that they spoke. Love was supposed to be followed up by the actions and the kind voice tone and the feeling of safety. Yet love never felt safe for me, never felt secure or evident in any way. Love always equaled pain. Love always equaled insecurity. And love always equaled drama and tears. Yet I would be blessed after the birth of my daughter and son to realize what true, unrequited, safe, nurturing, and kind love was. And that was because I was determined I would create, maintain, and fight for that safe, loving love and environment for them. I could not comprehend for a long time that a partner or family members could or would be so unkind on purpose or set out to cause harm emotionally to another member. Yet, if I was honest with myself, I was also aware that for as long as I could remember, I had felt worthless, less than, invisible, and that somehow I had almost felt I deserved the mistreatment and abuse. As one lady recently commented on my Facebook post, we women have a tendency to believe that we don't deserve any better, so a vicious cycle ensues, and that has to change. And she is so correct. I hope to help to be that change for you. I worked hard for the life that I have now, and it has been really tough at times. It took much deep and honest exploration of my core beliefs about myself and their origins before I could make a long-lasting and impressionable change for me, for the good. It took me a while to change, and I hope that by sharing my journey, you can fast-track your own change to recognizing your own worth. I think this story about the elephant and rope explains it best. A gentleman was walking through an elephant camp one day when he spotted that the elephants weren't being kept in cages or held captive by the use of chains. All that was holding them from escaping this camp was a small piece of rope tied to one of their legs and attached to a tiny, spindly stick in the ground. As the man gazed upon the elephants, he was completely confused as to why the elephants didn't just use their strength to break the rope, pull the stick out, and escape the camp. They could easily have done so, but instead, they didn't try at all. Curious and wishing to know the answer, he asked a trainer nearby why the elephants were just standing there and never even tried to escape. The trainer replied, "When the elephants are calves, very young and much smaller, we use the same size of rope to tie them, and at that age it's enough to hold them. As they grow up, they are conditioned to come to believe they cannot break away. They believe the rope and the small stick can still hold them captive, so they never even try to break free. The gentlemen realized that the only reason that the elephants weren't breaking free and escaping from the camp and their captivity was that over time they had adopted the belief that it just wasn't possible, that they were trapped and never tried again. The moral of the story is clear. We are all a byproduct of our conditioning and upbringing. Often we are tied to the old beliefs that we have outgrown, like the elephant, don't give a true reflection of our own growth, and could be broken if we find a safe, knowledgeable person to help us explore how to. No matter how much the world or a person tries to hold you back, pursue your dreams, for they are possible to achieve with the right guidance. It may be the old beliefs that are holding you back. The same goes for toxic relationships. It may be that you feel trapped and attached and unable to break free like the elephants in our story, but you are more powerful than you believe. The same goes for endometriosis and adenomyosis, and cysts and fibroids. Believing you can become pain-free and healthy is the first most crucial step in actually stepping forward into achieving it. The next step is then learning empowering, positive, and proactive safe ways to break free from the rope or ropes that are holding you back. I understand that on this journey, many other women struggle with this cold, hard reality and acceptance of those toxic people's behavior around them. It is often incomprehensible to many that behind the closed doors of many homes up and down the country and across many cultures and religions and across the seas, that women and children could be suffering from anxiety, fear, worry, and constant emotional mistreatment. This over and above the physical pains and symptoms of endometriosis and adenomyosis. This emotional mistreatment doesn't just affect women and children in the UK or the USA or Europe. I work with women all over the world, and it affects many women and shows up in different ways globally. What is clear is that emotional mistreatment or domestic abuse are unacceptable and can cause tremendous long-term suffering and distress if not addressed slowly, carefully, and with guidance. In my online programs, I gently share with women what my definition of assertiveness is, rather than aggression, and how to discover and establish their true strength about what they think or positively feel about themselves, in some cases, for the first time in their lives. You see, women are not meant to suffer. Women are not meant to endure decades of emotional or physical pain. But sadly, through the generations, women have come to believe many false truths about their role in existence. One main fallacy is that women are meant to suffer every month and that this suffering is normal, in inverted commas. Women are not meant to have painful periods or monthly cycles. Pain with a period is not normal. Pain in the body, in any area of the body, is the body's way to indicate that something is wrong and that it seeks your attention to correct that wrong. Women are not supposed to be crippled by pain and or missing several days every month in their bed, doubled over with chronic abdominal cramps, clasping their friend, the hot water bottle, to their abdomen, as their insides feel like razor blades are tearing their uterus apart from the inside out. Quite the contrary. Women are only supposed to have a 2 to 3 days period that is light, clot-free, a drama-free, and a non-event every month. Women are supposed to have a healthy and robust immune system that is equivalent to a strong marching army. A mighty army that strides out every day to mop up and clean up any endometrial debris that may have migrated into the abdomen or the pouch of Douglas or onto the ovaries or fallopian tubes or outside the uterus, as well, of course, as destroying viruses, bacteria, and pathogens. However, if the woman's body feels under constant threat, then the woman may end up living in this soup of stressful hormones, including cortisol and adrenaline. This in turn means her inflammation increases further impairing her immune system. An immune system that is impaired due to high levels of chronic stress may malfunction, and even in some cases end up attacking itself, like in the case of autoimmune diseases. Then there is the nervous system that is a regulator or preceptor of what is safe or not safe in the environment or world a woman lives in. The nervous system and the immune system are like twin sisters. They are super close, like all the other organ systems in the family, but these two systems are in constant communication with each other. I'm going to go a bit deeper now and explain more about the biology and the physiology of the brain and the body and how they operate in high stressful situations. If the woman's subconscious perceives a threat from an unknown and unidentifiable source, for example, like her toxic coercive partner or family member, then her body focuses all of its energy back into primary survival mode. What I mean is, if the nervous system senses or perceives a threat from a toxic person, then the nervous system sends out alarm bells from the amygdala in the brain to action, fight, flight, freeze, fold. I may have mentioned how the digestive system is lined with over 100 million neurons, i.e. brain cells, which is the same amount a dog or cat has in its head. The perception of this threat evokes the nervous system in turn to release various stress hormones that have cascading and damaging effects throughout all aspects of a woman's body. If the woman's intestinal tract signals to the brain or vice versa via the vagus nerve that runs down the spine about this instinctual danger, then the body defaults into essential preservation and back into survival mode. What the body then focuses on is its primal protection system, and then shuts down or may restrict various organ systems that are not as important to the woman at this particular threatening time. The woman may end up with additional diagnoses like fibromyalgia and or chronic fatigue syndrome, like I had, yet be totally unaware that at a deep subconscious level, her body is perceiving this invisible yet real threat. It is common for women with endometriosis and adenomyosis to also suffer from many digestive issues and impairments as well. The many prescribed antibiotics or painkillers, drugs, and surgeries cause additional untold irritation and damage to her body and in her intestinal tract. If the woman's body feels under attack or threatened, then the body's view is that it's the priority to pump adrenaline and cortisol into the heart and legs to escape the perceived danger. That danger could be an unexpected rage attack from a partner or a surprise, scathing verbal assault from the very person that is supposed to love them. The woman's body is like a carefully balanced orchestra. All it needs is for one instrument to be playing off key or broken or unavailable, and it knocks the whole sound off. So I hope that by explaining some background from a physiological and biological perspective, you may start to understand why, if you have been addressing changes to your diet and or products and not had the progress you had sought, if you have been confused about the challenge of putting endometriosis into remission, it may be why your body remains inflamed and hormonally imbalanced. Then this may be one explanation. It's important to remember that your current physical situation is not your fault. I have mentioned this before. But you don't know what you don't know. And I'm here to encourage you to learn more. The trick is to get yourself into the know now. There may be much going on a subconscious level within your brain that is below your level of consciousness. And this is why I had to share This Is Domestic Abuse series with you. Like in the jungle or animal kingdom, there are predators out there in life, and it is no different in the human world or the human kingdom either. However, societal pressures, religious revelations, and suppressed conditioning whilst growing up preach to us that we are supposed to love everyone, irrelevant of whether they mean harm to us or not. And what a load of baloney. It's total insanity to suggest such a thing. That conditioning, I came to realize, was a surefire way of attracting dishonest and abusive individuals who would use this naivety against us unsuspecting women who have been worn down by other toxic people in our lives. In the animal kingdom, This lunacy of a blanket approach to loving everyone would be classed as absurd and downright dangerous. It is the equivalent to a small, graceful gazelle innocently grazing away on the open plain on the grasses, eating its shoots and leaves, then lifting its head in a relaxed fashion and turning round to its herd saying, "Hey guys, see that lion over there? Well, don't worry about him, just love him." And we all know how that would turn out. Yes, that innocent and naive gazelle is just about to become the lion's next breakfast, lunch, or dinner. It is the same issues that prevail in the human kingdom, albeit a little bit more sophisticatedly. There are some deeply beautiful people in the world, but contrary to some popular religious teachings, there are also some truly toxic and destructive people too that exist among us as well. Some people do mean you real harm. Some people are predatory by nature, like the lion or the shark or the vulture. It is those predators and people that you need to learn how to protect yourself from. I heard a speaker at a conference stand on stage and forcefully state to the audience, "You must forgive everyone." Yet whilst the principle of what he was saying was well-meaning, i.e. encouraging people not to harbour negative feelings, his statement lacked depth and understanding of the truly toxic nature of dangerous people. I believe there needs to be a further explanation of what forgiveness is or means in relation to real-life people in the human kingdom. Going back to the gazelle analogy, a lion's nature is to eat it. If this lion had tried to eat the gazelle previously and failed, yet was being encouraged to forgive it, it would be irresponsible and naive of the gazelle to forgive the lion, for that would mean a lowering of the gazelle's guard and its boundaries, encouraging the ignoring of its protective instincts, and make the gazelle more susceptible to attack again to any predatory lion. A lion is a lion. It's irrelevant if a lion turns around and says he wasn't a lion or didn't mean it in his last attempt to attack the gazelle. The lion's words would be meaningless. It is the actions and the behaviors that reiterate and confirm the lion's true nature. It is in his nature. So it is always the actions with people that we must pay attention to and not the words. So if by forgiveness the speaker meant to let go of trying to please, placate, influence and change a particularly difficult person and accept them as they are, i.e. a toxic, controlling and harmful person, but encourage the establishment of very clear boundaries for their own protection, then of course I would agree with that definition of forgiveness. However, I feel that that was not what the speaker meant. It was a usual blanket statement that I know some people in the audience were probably left feeling guilty for having unpleasant and uncomfortable feelings towards a toxic person who had hurt or harmed them in the past. Having unpleasant feelings towards a toxic person is a normal and healthy reaction to mistreatment. And this is where forgiveness message becomes messy. It is easier to forgive, in inverted commas, a toxic person from a distance after you have been able to escape the abuse and mistreatment. It is easier to forgive if you've had support through a kind, loving and supportive friend, family and or counsellor who are aware, educated and understand the emotional abuse you have suffered through the triangulation, gaslighting and abhorrent emotional mistreatment. Yet sadly, very few people understand. It takes us women long enough to figure it out ourselves, especially when we make the endless excuses and or feel that somehow we deserve the mistreatment. Real forgiveness should actually be for yourself. Real forgiveness for yourself means ceasing to beat yourself up emotionally when you have already been beaten down subconsciously by your relentless inner critic part in your head every day. Real forgiveness means questioning very gently as to why you allowed yourself to be so mistreated for so long and thought that you were like the elephant attached to a rope that you couldn't escape from. Real forgiveness for your perpetrator comes when you have had a chance to grieve and heal and learn how to separate your emotional entanglement to your toxic partner or family member safely. Real forgiveness comes when you've had a chance to learn about the subconscious factors that were created when you were very young, and like a background operating system in a computer, have been directing the course of your life and relationships. Forgiveness comes when a woman begins to understand why a part of her cries, but why do I keep being attracted to the same type of man who treats me poorly? And another new part can emerge from learning how to empower herself slowly and safely, and explain the background to the subconscious conditioning and continue to untangle herself. The answers lie deep within our subconscious, and I'll explain later how you can safely start to be curious about what lies deep within you. And you will be surprised about the wealth of wisdom and that pot of gold that lies deep in your soul and spirit. But more on that later. What I didn't raise over the last 2 episodes was how many women with endometriosis and adenomyosis not only have they experienced abuse and mistreatment at home, but often at the hands of the very medical professionals or surgeons or consultants who are supposed to support and help them heal. Sadly, it is normally by the time that women reach out to me to apply to work with me that they have tried the well-worn medical field pathway and have often been left feeling mistreated, adrift, lost, sicker than they expected. I hear the same stories regularly, and they all form the same background. The woman being made to feel stupid by the doctor or an annoyance, being questioned if they are really that ill or in that much pain, being told that the doctors can't see anything and therefore they must be a hypochondriac, and even downright plain harassment by phone or emails to push and bully the woman into getting further surgeries when the previous ones have made them sicker. I have a story of a client who received endless calls from her consultant's assistant to book in another surgery. Yet my client had said to him 6 weeks before that she wished to embark on this natural route with me first and had asked him to support her in her choice. Yet the consultant continued to harass her via his assistant with emails, pressurizing her to have more surgery, which my client had declined, and his treatment intensified my client's feelings of anxiety as she felt threatened and scared by his bullying behavior. Another former client was pressured into having surgery by her husband and consultant despite her not wishing it, and she was left feeling discarded and utterly alone afterwards. These stories are just the tip of the iceberg of the mistreatment and abuse stories I hear every day. Bullying and abuse and emotional mistreatment is widespread in many areas of society by toxic people in positions of authority, and I believe, as I mentioned last week, it is an epidemic of gigantic proportions that few are even aware of. So if you're listening to this podcast, please be reminded that your current circumstances and inability to get well is not your fault. And if you find yourself incapacitated and suffering for decades, then there is another way out for you. There is another pathway. It is a new empowering pathway that helps you break free from that rope and stick that is holding you back in pain. There may be much going on under the surface than you are aware of. So significant and impactful empowerment and change start with focusing on yourself first. I believe that the secret to life is balance, be it hormones, food, products, stress, fun, etc. I believe the secret to balance is awareness. And I believe the secret to awareness is through journaling and meditation. How many of us are bombarded regularly with pings and beeps and rings every single day, so that any time to actually sit and reflect and feel any feeling feels an inordinate task. And this is where awareness is key. Small, secure steps of change start with being aware of yourself first. Awareness means just noticing and just paying attention. Notice how often you cry in a day. Notice how often you cry in a week. Notice who makes you cry. Notice how many arguments are being had in the home. Notice the common denominator and the triggers. Notice if your partner is never ever happy and blames you for his unhappiness. Notice if you're grinding your teeth at night and there is blood on the pillow in the morning when you wake. Notice if you suffer from terrible tension in your shoulders and neck. Notice if you suffer from chronic debilitating migraines that come from nowhere. Notice if you're confused and perplexed by profound yet punishing silences from your partner. Notice if you feel deprived of the physical closeness, hugs, kisses, and gentle tending love or care you seek. Notice if your partner is deliberately withholding physical attention. And notice if you feel depressed, sad, and alone. You're not meant to suffer in this way. This was not what you dreamed about when you were a little girl. Sadly, the fairy tales are just that, fairy tales. There are no knights in shining armor upon their white steed that will come along and sweep you off your feet. I dislike being the one to burst that Hollywood bubble, but we all know it is true. Yet you can become your own knight in shining armor and your own hero. What you seek as a woman is a secure and safe form of love. What you seek is a reliable, dependable form of love and safety and security. And an element of understanding and an ability from your partner to want to understand you, not just attack or ignore you. What most women seek is to feel, to be seen, heard, and appreciated, which, by the way, are normal and healthy needs. Start with awareness of what affects you, your feelings and emotions, and start to give yourself all that you need and step into those early embers of empowerment. I created recently the most common needs form for my Embracing Emotions, Empathy, and Energy program, and I ended up listing over 100 different needs. How many needs do you feel are being met for you by yourself right now? I suspect very few. If you are listening to this podcast, feel lost, alone, and miserable, and stuck in a relationship that is unpredictable and unsettling to you, a relationship that makes you feel like you're an emotional roller coaster, then start the small ant-sized step by paying attention to your own needs first. Relationships are not supposed to be a roller coaster of 1 minute love bombing you and making you feel like you're his soulmate, then bang, in a flash, he has gone emotionally distant and been replaced with a stranger, a man you do not recognize, one who is unkind, avoidant, and cruel. That roller coaster causes untold harm to your nervous system and impairs and prevents your immune system from doing its glorious job, which is to heal your body. This type of mistreatment or abuse is no life for any woman, especially if she has endometriosis or adenomyosis. This may be the final piece in the puzzle that is hindering her natural healing process. So what can you do if you suspect that you might be in a domestic abuse or emotional mistreated relationship or situation? For me, it started when I saw a 30 seconds advert on TV called "This is Domestic Abuse," produced by the Home Office of the British government. But I knew I had to educate myself. I was so struck by the profound, subtle, yet unpleasant treatment that had almost become commonplace for me at home, which was now being labelled as abuse, in inverted commas, on TV. The word abuse felt such a loaded word for me initially, and the terminology that I shied away from and stayed in denial about for a while afterwards. Martin Luther King said, "Education is one thing they cannot take away from you." Educate yourself about emotional abuse. Abuse isn't always physical, remember, and if you suspect that you are in an emotionally abusive relationship, then education is king. Education is where the real empowerment comes from. Real emotional freedom for women comes from what I refer to as the AIEIE: awareness, information, education, inspiration, and empowerment. But let me share with you another story that may help you increase how leopards do not change their spots. Yes, leopards may try to dust over their spots with camouflage, but the spots are still there. This is the story of the scorpion and the frog. One day, a scorpion and a frog meet on the edge of a riverbank of a bubbling, fast-moving river. The river was far too treacherous to cross alone, so the scorpion politely turned round to the frog and asked if he could carry him across on his back. The frog felt a little suspicious. He asked, "How do I know I can trust you and you won't sting me?" The scorpion said, "Because if I did sting you, I would die too." That reasoning sounded plausible and made sense to the frog, so he decided to ignore his instincts and relaxed his nerves. So the frog allowed the scorpion to climb aboard his back, and they both entered into the river and made their way across the fast-flowing water. They got halfway across the river, and the frog felt a sharp sting of the scorpion pierce directly into the middle of his back. The frog was shocked and alarmed as he felt the onset of the scorpion's poison move into his body, and they both started to sink. The frog managed one final question with his last dying breath. "But why did you sting me?" he gasped. And the scorpion replied, "I can't help it. It's in my nature." The moral of this story is striking. It is that, like the scorpion, many humans possess compulsions and characteristics that they cannot repress or change, even when it's in their best interest to avoid. On the flip side, the frog is a testament to the danger of ignoring your instincts and being too trusting to someone's true nature. In the end, the biggest takeaway is that it's very important to know someone at their core and make judgments based on that. It teaches us that vicious, toxic people often cannot resist hurting others, even when it's not in their interests. If you identify that your partner or family member is toxic, then recognize that this toxic person is never, ever going to change, no matter what you say or do. That is their nature. You know how hard it is to change yourself when you really do want to change, yet these toxic people have no desire to change. That is their nature, like the other predatory species in the world. If you can learn this now, you'll be far quicker than me in breaking the rope and chains that kept me tied way longer than was healthy for me. So if this podcast is increasing your awareness to any form of mistreatment, be it from a bullying boss, a foul family member or friend, or indeed maybe your partner or husband, I reiterate that these people are poisonous, so proceed slowly, as slow as fast. How do you run away from a brown grizzly bear? Well, according to the experts, you don't. What you do if you encounter a bear is you walk away very, very slowly and very, very carefully so as not to alert them to what your intentions are. The reason for this is their foul behavior may have instigated from trauma bonding and awareness, and it takes time to untangle yourself, like the elephant and rope story. Toxic people like to emotionally harm and inflict pain upon their prey. Chances are, if you're listening to my podcast and have endometriosis and adenomyosis, you're probably a lovely, kind, big-hearted woman who loves to keep everyone happy. And so when the toxic person starts to realize that you are not accepting of their behavior anymore, they may escalate their foul behavior, games and tactics to start with, and or love bomb you temporarily again to increase the strength of the trauma bond. So be aware and be awake. Get informed and educated. Watch the actions of your partner or friends or family, for the actions speak much louder than any words coming out their mouth. Words are cheap. Record everything from the foul behavior, the tears, the triggers, the drama, the gaslighting, the cognitive dissonance, be it on audio or written, but keep this documenting to yourself. You're building up evidence for yourself to reassure that part of you that does not want to truly believe that this toxic person is toxic, for they wear a mask. I listened to an interview recently between the actress Jada Pinkett Smith, Will Smith's wife, and Demi Moore and their daughters, called The Red Table Talk. It was an honest, candid, and open conversation that covered their own personal journeys, but in particular, they opened up about their lack of self-worth and lack of value. Here were women who, by all accounts and purposes in society, are successful by Hollywood standards. Yet despite their fame, wealth, and material trappings, they talked about battling alcoholism, anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, and of feeling small and worthless. It really was astounding to hear. Our cultures encourage us to see this allure and the golden chalice of fame and success and status through being on TV, film, or having an abundance of material goods to be loved and happy. Marketeers promise untold happiness, joy, and eternal celebration if we can just get that car or that house or that material item. Yet I know from my own journey, when I had the fabulous car and the beautiful home and the nicest area and the jewelry and the trappings, that none of that made me happy at my core. The toxic people around me would use those elements as bait to control me. I would come to learn to let go of people, places, and things, and learn the only person that I could control was myself. All the external claptrap and nonsense that is projected upon us by adverts and glossy magazines are just that, nonsense. I would come to learn that it would be the sight of my children in the rear view mirror of my car and seeing their beautiful brown eyes sparkling and twinkling back at me and hearing their laughter that brought me more joy at that moment than any external material items. Or the sight of a new leaf or flower emerging from a plant that I had brought back to life, or the first signs of spring and the promise it brought, would bring me that fleeting feeling of simple pleasure and joy. Or learning to paint oil on canvas, purchasing a small speaker and dancing around my kitchen to great soul music, and or deep, meaningful yet purposeful conversations with friends and family that would bring me the greater connectedness and joy than any external material success could bring. Connection and knowingness about yourself, warts and all as they say, made me joyful. Learning to like myself and then love me in a simple, healthy way, along with establishing super clear and protective boundaries from toxic people, was true empowerment for me. Then sharing what I had learned to help other women break free from their ropes and sticks that held them, that was the greatest joy of all. I was humbled to hear the naked honesty about Jada Pinkett Smith's journey and Demi Moore's journey and their feelings of these 6 Hollywood women around the red table. One comment struck me the most was when Demi Moore's daughter said, "I knew my mum loved me, but it was because she didn't love herself. I felt, well, how can I love myself if she doesn't even love herself?" It occurred to me that this is a common issue that comes down many generations of women from mother to daughter and daughter downward. It is more common than we realize that there are these ancestral lines of women in suffering, anxiety, and misery. Women isolated and left feeling lost and alone and in deep emotional pain. So not only do you realize or release yourself from suffering when you step into a new pathway, but you end your daughter's potential suffering and your granddaughter's potential suffering and your great-granddaughter's potential suffering too. What was not discussed around that red table talk was the emotional mistreatment of women at the hands of men. And let's be clear, I'm not here to bash men at all, far from it. Some men are more confused now than ever at the hands of toxic fathers and bosses as well. I have a very handsome son who's a grown man, yet he had his own experience of suffering too. He was lucky to have a safe, nurturing, supportive, and safe environment and did the counselling and psychological work on himself to be who he is today. When he was young, he asked me a question one day. "Mum, do you think I might have turned out toxic and subconsciously, emotionally mistreating women if I hadn't had this awareness or done this work early on?" We will never know, because I recognize the importance of his education and empowerment to connect to his own power and what was required. What I do know is the recent figures from the Office of National Statistics, which state that some 80% of suicides are by young men who were unlucky to have the support, not to have the support, and perhaps unable to escape abuse and mistreatment in the home. So this podcast about empowerment is what it means to start to take the first step. Explain what small, safe, and secure steps you can take to explore yourself in your relationships, especially if you suspect that your partner may be mistreating you or maybe not giving you the respect you deserve. Firstly, to reassure yourself that we are not talking about selfishness here or self-centered. Women with endometriosis could never be classed as selfish. Their challenge remains to learn how to put themselves first and take personal care of themselves. There are many types of empowerment: physical, financial, and emotional. And we start with the emotional empowerment. What I mean by emotional empowerment is by paying attention to your thoughts, feelings, and emotions to start with, as mentioned above. What is important is recognizing that you are just as important as anyone else, and you have the right to have your seat at the table of life. What I took from the Red Table Talk was that even these amazingly successful, glamorous, beautiful women sometimes wanted to keep themselves small and hide too. So clearly, there is a deep societal issue that movements like the Me Too movement have started to challenge, especially within the realms of sexual harassment and intimidation. But your value is something you can start to measure. Ultimately, what I encourage with women I work with is to develop and imagine a new compassionate internal part or self that I refer to as an internal parent voice in your head. That internal parent is a new voice that offers kind, reassuring, and compassionate words of encouragement and support to yourself. Rather than allowing that internal harsh critic part to dominate your thoughts, start to recognize that your critic is just trying to protect you and keep you safe from harm or mistakes that could cause a backlash from a toxic person. So the first step to empowering yourself is to start to journal. Let the ink from a pen mark the paper of a journal regularly and allow the download and escape of thoughts and feelings from your head. Notice the harshness of your own judgment and words, and slowly over a period of time, learn to be more kind and compassionate. The very act of writing every morning will slowly start to open up and connect you to your instincts. And as I mentioned above, will allow you to tap into this wealth of genius that lies within you and your untold inner wisdom. Many studies from Harvard to Cambridge universities will testify to the positive effects writing can bring from awareness to the physical and emotional improvement of health. Writing allows that first step to empowerment by connecting to yourself in a new way. Rather than the harshness of your internal dialogue, learn to notice the impact that small, kind words and statements to yourself can have, and how they come to help release that pressure and noise in your head. Your own energy is like a beacon of light, attracting all sorts of predators. So your energy and emotional health needs a filter, much like a face mask filters out the germs, bacteria, and viruses. Equally, emotional protection is like the house that has a front door to protect and prevent intruders coming into your home, with a gate or a fence that acts as a further boundary, along with an intruder alarm, sensor, and cameras to monitor your grounds or external area. This is what you seek in your own life by way of emotional protection and empowerment. Imagine the protective rings of security for yourself from poisonous people, much like the rings of a tree trunk. If you're to cut down a tree, you'd see at the center of the trunk the rings of its growth throughout the years. Imagine in the center of the tree, it is you that stands there, with the next ring being your most trusted, safe family member and or partner and or husband and children. The next ring out may be a close friend or extended family member, and the next ring might be work colleagues and so forth. Ultimately, your responsibility is to protect yourself, mind, body, spirit, and soul. Continue to pay attention to your body, for it's always trying to communicate to you who is safe and who is not. Your thoughts are the language of your brain, and your feelings are the language of your body. Your emotions are messengers telling you a story, and the best way to interpret that story is by allowing a safe download onto paper every single day, and or every single time you feel upset, stress, tears, or drama. This simple yet powerful process allows you over time to make sense and gain clarity of any pressure, noise, chaos, or drama that is happening in your life. Any true extent of drama and mistreatment in relationships is normally evident by the number of tears that are shed in a day, in a week, or in a month. A woman is not supposed to spend her days crying 2 to 3 times every day, but if you find yourself crying a lot, then write down the person, the trigger, and the feeling associated with the tears, and use those tears to water the soil of those new seeds that you are starting to plant. Use your journal to record your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, anxieties, and upsets. Become awake and alert to your feelings and emotions. For again, it's worth repeating, they are messengers. It is essential to reiterate the importance of keeping any written journal private and keep it under lock and key and safely away from any toxic prying eyes, especially if you suspect a partner or husband is toxic. If a partner or a friend or a colleague start to inquire and show interest that you are writing in your journal, then I would suggest to deflect them by saying that you're just recording your physical symptoms. That is normally a pretty good deterrent for the nosy Parkers. Your emotions are messengers, as I say, and the very act of increasing awareness is half the battle to evoking change and empowerment. We all seek change and fear change in equal measure. On my journey, I was truly terrified at every step, for I had no one but myself to keep moving forward. My upbringing had done a good job of reinforcing the rope to the stick. I also feared to step out into that change to know what that would mean for me. Yet there was something deeper in me that had a calling. I recognized my desires, my yearnings, and my pangs of pain to escape the clutches of the suppression and poisonous playmates I had. And you know as well that deep down you also have that calling too. You have a calling to forge change. To forge change, we have to be that change. We have more power than we realize, yet it is essential to recognize that we are powerless over other people, places, and things. We are also powerful over ourselves, yet many in society would have us believe that we should be meek, mild-mannered, a good girl, and sit quietly in the shadows with a pink ribbon in her hair, or be barefoot and pregnant and chained to the kitchen sink. My mother and grandmother missed out on the opportunities that are now available to us as women by about 20 years, and now we women have so many opportunities and access to empowering information and education to help inspire us and empower us. The empowerment begins by paying attention, by increasing your awareness to your body, and slowly but surely connecting to your own inner instincts by learning the messages of your emotions and feelings and your body. So how do you escape a toxic and abusive relationship? Slowly. How do you escape out of that snake pit? You back out slowly, one step at a time, very, very, very slowly. Toxic people have quite a nasty bite. If you think of the snake pit, you're in one like the one in the Indiana Jones film, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Indiana Jones has to back out of that snake pit very, very slowly, waving his torch about and keeping his eyes vigilant to where the snakes might be coming from next. You may have many snakes in your midst. If you find or recognize that you are in a toxic and poisonous relationship, start by journaling about it and seek to back out very, very slowly so you don't get bitten. Empowerment isn't just a physical act or statement, and more on that later, but it is an emotional one, as I've said. Using another analogy, if you were to plant a seed in good, nutritious soil with sun and water, it will grow. It takes time for roots to take hold and then produce fragile green shoots that come up through the soil. Over many years, that small seed will grow into a strong, secure, solid oak tree with roots that will spread out far and wide. That tree will continue to grow into a strong, tall, majestic oak tree that will withstand all storms, rain, and winds. This oak tree will pull in the best from life through its nutrients, further strengthening its trunk and core, which in turn will produce the best fruit and leaves on the branches of that tree. To plant that seed for you, ensure that you put pen to paper every morning and notice the commonalities of emotions and feelings that arise within you. And try to do this without judgment. Just notice what comes up. You deserve a life free of pain and suffering. It's worth repeating, you are not meant to suffer. Life may have been full of suffering up until this point, and elements of your body are screaming at you and causing you pain and symptoms to get your attention, whether it be any one of the 5 poisons or a combination of them all. It starts with one tiny small step at a time, and note I say one small ant-sized step, because if you do realize you're in a toxic relationship and have been in toxic relationships over many years, it is hard for certain parts of your psyche to make sense of this and to unravel the past. Start by just noticing. Start by just paying attention. Start by watching and observing every single one of your emotions, even those emotions that you view as unpleasant. Even the emotions that society says that you're not allowed to have. In particular, pay attention to anxiety, fear, and anger, for they are the strongest and the deepest of emotions that carry so much insight and wisdom. When you are compassionate to those unpleasant emotions and allow curiosity, then you can develop a greater understanding for them. Become curious of who and what is around you when you feel stressed, tense, tired, or emotional. Become curious of who and what is around you when you're finding yourself crying again and feeling depressed and anxious. How do you feel when you're around particular people, places, and things? Start to put the pieces of your jigsaw puzzle together and recognize at the core that it's not your fault that you're in this situation today. It is because a lot of subconscious conditioning from early years has created these environments and relationships, just like the lion in the rope story. However, you now have the responsibility and the embers of power to start to make real and lasting changes that need to be made to release you from the chains of suffering. Learn the art of assertiveness, which, by the way, is very different from aggression. Learn how to be assertive by connecting to your inner voice and wisdom. Your instincts are much stronger than you realize. And as I mentioned earlier, your intestinal tract is lined with over 100 million neurons. So your instincts are constantly trying to communicate to you. Hence the phrase, listen to your gut instincts. You are much more powerful than anyone permitted you to know. Empowerment starts from the inside out. Empowerment starts by realizing the pressure cooker of thoughts and feelings need a release onto paper. Give them a way out to connect you to your heart and soul, for they are yearning for you to listen. Explore what is going on inside your body and brain by putting ink on paper every single day. This is why I created the impactful and supportive 21-day online challenge. The next 21-day online challenge starts on Monday. And if you have identified with anything I have shared so far over the past few weeks or months, then I encourage you to join. I will lovingly, kindly, and safely challenge you every single day to start this new empowering journey to connect to your beautiful inner self. And don't worry, none of this is any woo-woo stuff. This will all be science-based and practical-based guidance and tools to help gently guide you to start this small journey of stepping into a beautiful you that lies within. I especially created this online 21-day challenge to challenge women to pay attention to their thoughts, feelings, and emotions for 21 days straight and learn how to put themselves first. To help women safely pay attention through journaling and relaxation secrets to shed light on their relationships and their life. It has been said it takes 21 days to change a habit. Well, this 21-day online challenge will change your habits of beating yourself up and introduce you to simple secrets of how to process uncomfortable thoughts and feelings and beliefs and come to notice the joy and peace and tranquility and connect to the enlightenment that lies within you. I will share with you the secrets of how to retrain your brain to manage your mind and your thoughts so you don't feel overwhelmed or like you're unable to cope anymore. You will learn to start to take practical, purposeful, and pragmatic steps to empowerment by embracing all of your feelings and emotions, learn how to reduce anxiety and start that all-important empowerment process and pathway to a life that you are destined and deserve to live. A life that is supposed to be pain-free, symptom-free, and stepping into your own light and realizing and recognizing your full potential in this world. So I will share with you one final story. As a group of frogs were traveling through the woods one day, two frogs called Fred and Frank slipped and accidentally fell into a deep, dark, muddy pit. Upon hearing the screams as they fell, the other frogs in the group stopped and crowded round the top of the pit and peered down to see them clambering and desperately holding on to a thin ledge. Some members of the group realised how slippery and deep the pit was, so they shouted down to Fred and Frank that they were too far down, that it was far too deep, and that they would never make it back up. The group of frogs kept yelling down with great consternation and told the two frogs that there was no hope left for them. However, the two frogs who were down there in the pit conferred with each other and concluded they literally had no choice but to keep trying. So Fred and Frank both determined that they had to get out, so decided to ignore what the others were saying and proceeded to try and jump out of the pit. The two frogs huffed and puffed and groaned and exerted all their energies to try and jump as high as they could to escape the pit. Despite their efforts, the group of frogs at the top of the pit were still declaring to them that they should just give up. The group of frogs were still saying that they would never make it out of the pit. Eventually, one of the frogs, Frank, felt somewhat defeated and allowed the negative words of the group to penetrate deep into his head. He listened to what the others were saying and decided that they were right and he would give up. So poor Frank let go and plummeted further down into the darkness of the pit. Fred was alarmed and saddened to witness Frank's disappearance, but it made him more determined to get out of his situation. He continued to jump as hard as he could. Again, the crowd of frogs yelled at him to stop the pain and just give up. But Fred eventually managed to jump up even higher and finally made it out of the pit to his utter delight. When he got out, Fred had expected his group of frogs to turn round and celebrate with him. He had expected them to be happy for him. Yet, interestingly, all the other frogs could say was, "Did you not hear us?" Fred explained that he had a partial hearing problem in one ear and couldn't quite make out what they had all been saying. Fred, as it turned out, had mistakenly thought that the group were encouraging him upwards the entire time, but of course they weren't. The moral of this story here is that words do affect us and impact us, despite that old age saying of sticks and stones may break my bones, but words they cannot hurt me. Words do impact us, do encourage us, especially when they come from someone or someones who are supposed to be our safe, loving partners, friends, or a safe, believing mirror. People's words can have a big impact on our lives and where we direct our energies. So be mindful about what words you hear from others. Notice how they impact your body and feelings. Notice the toxic people you interact with and their words. Ask yourself regularly if the people that you keep company with are energy giving, encouraging, and uplifting, or are they discouraging, demeaning, derogatory, and destructive, like that group of frogs? Choose your company carefully. Some nasty naysayers may well be a lot more closer to you than you realize if they are close family, friends, and work colleagues. So ensure to use your new awareness to good effect, as it might just be the difference between life and death. Become partially deaf to those toxic people as you start to separate and empower yourself on this new journey. Sharpen your hearing and open your ears, mind, and spirit to those safe people who will lift you up and encourage you, just like this magnificent, growing group of beautiful women in the Endoboss community. We are a family of women who have overcome and succeeded in freeing ourselves from the abuse or emotional mistreatment, and have learned how to put our endometriosis, adenomyosis, cysts, and fibroids into remission naturally. So I encourage you to join us on this next 21-day online challenge, where you will see firsthand for yourself and learn how to reduce anxiety, depression, and learn to embrace emotions and feelings in a new, healthy, freeing way. So please go to endoboss.com/challenge. And finally, I leave you with an old yet very wise Chinese proverb. Many a false step was made by standing still. So take that first step into positive action now, and we look forward to meeting you on the challenge. Be your own boss and endoboss to your health.
Thanks for listening to Heal Endometriosis Naturally with Wendy K Laidlaw. And I hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and rate us. If you're interested in learning more, you can download your top 5 jumpstart tips at healendometriosisnaturally.com and jump on the VIP email list. Remember to keep you number one. The world needs a healthy you.